नमस्कार दोस्तों, my name is CA Hemant Gupta. I am also a practicing insolvency professional. I am making this video for the benefit of all budding insolvency professionals who want to take up this profession but are afraid of few questions. So I'll try to answer those questions and hopefully those person will be able to take a call whether they want to join this profession or not. First and foremost question which comes to anybody's mind while taking up this profession is, once you qualify the IPA exam and become an insolvency professional, what kind of team and infrastructure is required to run this profession? So first and foremost, to answer this question, IBC is all about working with teams. You need not have those teams present in your office as your employees, but you need to collaborate with various people. You need to have various access to various technical people, qualified people to make the IBC process work. For example, you need to have access to some good advertising agencies to make public announcement and etc. To you need to have good team of lawyers, access to team of lawyers. You need to have access to good valuers. You need to have access to good security agency, so that whenever you want to take the possession of some factory or some assets of corporate debtor, you are not searching for security personals at that moment. You need to have good access to support staff like part-time accountants, CFOs, technical persons, because as a IP you certainly would not be knowing each and every craft and each and every technical aspects of various industry present in the country. Other technical agencies might also be required, so you need to have access to e-voting agencies, virtual data room service providers. Last but not the least, you need to have physical infrastructure present with you. At times you need to show your physical capabilities to perhaps to corporate debtor, perhaps to your prospective client, financial creditor, that you are capable to handle any influx of extra work other than your routine practice during the IBC. So that kind of infrastructure is required. Lastly, I would say invest in teams, invest in persons rather than investing in ourselves only. Now moving to second question, as you all know, IBC requires 10-year minimum standing in respective professions, be it lawyer, chartered accountant, company secretary, CWA, or management consultant for that matter. Leaving aside 50 odd students which are taken in the process for a 2-year residential program, who take the residential program and become insolvency professional much before 10 years of standing in their respective profession. So question remains, why should anybody who is already 10 years into their profession, perhaps reasonably well settled into that profession, to take a plunge into something altogether different, altogether new? So let me tell you this with my own personal experience. As a practicing chartered accountant, it's been around 19 odd year into the practice. I've seen few cycles of ups and down of the practice. Earlier, the major professional work tools were pen, pencil, calculator. Now we have moved on to cloud computing and progressing towards blockchain, artificial intelligence, etc. Though any chartered accountant or any professional who is 10 years into the practice would be still a relatively young chartered accountant, but still that 10-year exposure would be there. He or she must have set up their own practice. They would have a reasonable experience in their own practice. But I see a lot of potential for experienced CAs who might not be that tech savvy but certainly are people savvy, and IBC, to my understanding, is more about people than about law and regulations. Communication, and I must say highly appropriate communication, verbal, non-verbal, or for that matter written communication, is the key in the IBC. Senior chartered accountants who have seen various ups and downs of the practice of working life, or for that matter other professionals other than CAs as well, who are qualified to become IPs. I believe they have certain skill sets with relation to communication which they have acquired due to the fact that they've been to their practice, they've been to their craft for such a long period of time. So that will be very useful for them to excel in IBC. Plus, there are various other reasons also for senior chartered accountant to get into the IBC. See, our chartered, in particular chartered accountant practice, if I talk about, we are facing a lot of stress on compliance practice. So IBC I see as a way out to many chartered accountants or practicing professionals who might not be that much inclined to go in for traditional practice of compliance. So now comes one more question. See, as of now, there are some 4,000 odd insolvency professionals registered with IBBI, and out of those 4,000 professionals, 1,000 professionals have not taken authorization for assignment. That means they are not willing to practice insolvency profession as such. So roughly 25% of the people are not inclined to practice the insolvency profession. So is it a worrying sign? Should you go on to become an insolvency profession and later on would not want to practice this profession at all? So to answer this question, yes, there are a lot of compliances and a lot of deadline and too many push and pulls from all the stakeholders in comparison to our traditional practices. Due to big haircuts, a lot of scrutiny of the process is also warranted. Our regulator is supposed to keep an eye on insolvency professional or other stakeholder in the process. IP being in center of all, definitely bear the brunt of all this for right and wrong reasons. At times, yes, there are uncertainty with relation to quantum of remuneration and for that matter realization of the already fixed remuneration. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the process, at times most of the IP have to use their personal resources in running of the process. Further, a lot of litigation and complaints are also involved in the process by opposing parties. IP being in the middle of the same is usually the victim of crossfiring here. So that definitely adds a lot of pressure and a lot of threats are also there on the IPs due to being in the center of all by the parties. So these are the very common push and pulls an IP faces. Further, due to nature of the process, regulations and oversight is extremely critical. But at times one may find that deadlines and these compliances to be highly regulated in comparison to our traditional practices. So we are perhaps not that much used to being highly regulated. So that also creates a pressure point for any practicing insolvency professional. Further, if you look at it, especially after COVID and even before that, the threshold limit were increased. The amount of default was 1 lakh. Now it's been become 1 crore, and due to COVID also the quantum of work which is coming is relatively less. There is a lot of pressure on adjudicating authorities. So the number of cases which are being churned out from adjudicating authorities is relatively less. COVID is also playing its part. So definitely professional opportunity has definitely reduced. So that might also be a reason for professionals to not to take up AFA authorization for assignment so actively. But having said all this, why people are not willing to practice as an insolvency professional, and even those who have taken up as a registration as an insolvency professional have not opted to take AFAs as on date. I would still say, to my understanding, this profession is only suitable to one if you are willing to venture out of your comfort zone and take the challenges head on. If you are satisfied with your traditional form of practice, so perhaps this IVC might not be your cup of things. But if you are someone who is able to mold himself or herself in any adverse situation and take challenges head on, then IVC is something which you will definitely like practicing and will definitely enjoy and thrive. Now, having discussed these points and you have decided to become insolvency professional and you are ready to make your life to a certain extent miserable also, you become an insolvency professional and decide to join the ranks of your fellow IPs. Now the question is, from where do you get the professional work and what do you do to acquaint yourself with professional developments, with the technical knowledge of IBC, since IBC is still a relatively new law. There is not much of the literature or traditional kind of literature as with the case with income tax or company law is available in the market. So how do you overcome that? So to answer this dilemma or this question, first we need to be very clear what is work in IBC. Work is not only the handling of insolvency cases as an insolvency professional. There are a lot of peripheria involved in this IBC profession. There are a lot of work which you can do in the IBC process. For example, drafting of information memorandum, drafting of RFRP, request for resolution plan, representation to COC, financial creditors. You can act as a pleader before the Honorable NCLT or for that matter NCLAT. You can assist in making of resolution plan. You can help in evaluating the resolution plan. You can provide support service to insolvency professionals. You can do the forensic audit. You can do transaction audit as per IBC regulation and IBC mandate. You can also help in monitoring of plan implementation. You can also assist the various stakeholders in finding of buyers, evaluating their background checks. All this thing can be done by a person who has the knowledge of IBC and who better than a practicing insolvency professional to have the knowledge about the process. So all this area, if you target, you are going to get some one or another form of the work. So what could be the possible sources of the work? First and foremost, since you've already been into the practice for minimum of 10 years, definitely you would be having certain clients. You can educate your client about the insolvency law, how this law operates, and how they can take the benefit of this law, how the companies can go into insolvency, or to the other side, how you can also advise company so that they do not get into insolvency. So your existing client base could get you some certain client with relation to IBC also. You can network with lawyers because they are usually doing pleading work in NCLTs. They would be having certain clients who would be approaching them for filing various application. They might refer you if you are in their network, or if they are in your network, for any possible appointment as IRP or RP in the process. Your fellow IPs can give you work. Suppose I have some certain assignment and some other work is being emanated from that assignment. So because of conflict of interest, I would not be able to take up that assignment. So I probably will look out for some other IPs. So you can network amongst fellow IPs. NCLT panel is a good source to get professional work in this regard, even though as discussed that work is relatively dried up due to COVID and increase in threshold limits. Bank empanelment is one way to approach this. If you are empaneled in various banks, they usually require IPs to represent them in COC meetings, or for that matter as a insolvency professional. Lastly, you yourself could do certain activities like being very visible on social media with relation to this insolvency matters, or you can participate in various WhatsApp groups or other social media groups. You can offer your advice, you can offer your research to your fellow professionals, you can help resolve their queries if you have good understanding about this law. So through that case, you'll create a visibility for yourself. So professional work can also flow due to this visibility as well. Further, lastly, if you want to acquaint yourself with IBC, self-study is, I believe, is the more important or most important thing. But what you can do is you can attend few court days as well to see the practical issues arising in various courts, and how they are being handled, and how objections are raised, and how objections are dealt with relation to those matters. You can also follow certain disciplinary cases so that you would know as a IP what you are supposed to do or what you are not supposed to do, and what are your limits while practicing this profession. So these could be a very good source to equip yourself to be a more effective insolvency professional. Now, lastly, one question which arises: how does the future look for aspiring IPs? Or what should be the expectations of IP while entering this profession in terms of responsibility and reward wise? Like any optimistic person, I am also very optimistic about this profession. Future to me is always promising, and for any hardworking professional, it will always be promising. IBC has drawn best of the talent across the various professions, so they are the people who have already started their practice, perhaps from scratch. They know how to build a practice. So building a practice in IBC might not be that hard in comparison to what kind of practice they built when they were nobody. One may argue that bright future for IP means more and more insolvent companies, which may seem to be negative connotation. But I think of it otherwise. IP or no IP, insolvency are going to be there, be it corporate insolvency or individual insolvencies. And it's not that insolvency have started only after coming of IBC. It used to be there before IBC as well. But there were different laws in place to take care of them, and perhaps they were very archaic law, not perhaps relevant in the current environment. Ultimately, what we need is we need a ecosystem to resolve these insolvencies and bankruptcies, and IPs play a very critical role in this ecosystem. As per my understanding, work will continue to flow for IPs. However, the speed may vary from time to time, from person to person. But rest assured, anyone with the core insolvency practice will never be out of work. This is my firm belief. Further, I would like to add, responsibility wise, I think IP should accustom himself with tight deadlines, pushing and pulling from various stakeholders, high level of scrutiny from regulators, and lastly, they should not be averse to any conflicts. Conflicts are part and parcel of IPs that you need to keep in mind. Further, talking about reward wise, I believe there is a sea of opportunity, but at times you might not be very near to those opportunity. That I would definitely agree. But as the competition is growing, professionals should not come with unreasonable financial expectations. However, if you commit to IBC full time, you are definitely going to get successful in this profession, and you will be definitely rewarded for your effort for sure. So I hope I was able to answer some of the question in the minds of aspiring insolvency professionals. In case you want any more clarification with regard to insolvency profession as such, do let me know in the comments. I would be more than happy to answer your queries. This is CA Hemant Gupta signing off. Thank you for watching this video.